Today, we're diving headfirst into the political powder keg that is the BIOSECURE Act. Picture this, you're a pharma executive, sipping your morning coffee, scrolling through the news, when suddenly, bam, Congress drops a legislative nuke on your entire supply chain. That's right, the U.S. House of Representatives just passed a bill that could make working with some of the biggest names in Chinese biotech about as popular as a coughing fit on an airplane. Now I know what you're thinking, but wait, my drugs come from China? Increasingly, more generic drugs and certainly the active pharmaceutical ingredients, APIs, in most of your small molecule drugs are currently coming from overseas, with the majority of that share coming from China. But if the BIOSECURE Act is passed, things are about to get real interesting. The BIOSECURE Act is basically Uncle Sam's way of saying, hey China, keep your hands off our precious pharmaceutical data. Congress claims that they've got secret intelligence that the Chinese biotech giants like WuXi AppTec and BGI are funneling American health data straight to the Chinese government. We can't actually verify any of this, but it would not be out of character for industrial and military espionage, and it's pretty juicy, right? But here's where it gets spicy. This isn't about protecting grandma's 23andMe results. Oh no, this bill is about who gets to control the global pharmaceutical supply chains, as well as the flow of cheaply made generics and APIs from Asia to the rest of the Western world. This act could upend entire pharmaceutical supply chains and result in major drug shortages. We're talking billions of dollars, tens of thousands of jobs, and who knows how many life-saving drugs hanging in the balance. Is this a noble effort to protect American innovation and national security, or is it a thinly veiled attempt to kneecap China's rising biotech sector and bring manufacturing back to the good old US of A? And could India sneak in to become the dominant low-cost provider for the world's generic drugs? Maybe it's a little column A, a little column B, and a whole lot of holy geopolitical mess, Batman. So why is this happening now? We find ourselves at an interesting crossroads in the global pharmaceutical industry, with trends of protectionism, governmental and regulatory pressures, reduced revenues for blockbuster drugs with legislation like the Inflation Reduction Act, regulatory pressures from agencies like the Federal Trade Commission to take a more activist approach in reducing consolidation, the overall lack of available manufacturing capacity due to the large volume required to support the manufacturing of anti-obesity drugs for an overweight population that needs it, as well as the retooling of the entire industry for major changes in modalities with cell and gene therapies and personalized cancer vaccines. With an aging population, the control over global pharmaceutical change is even more critical for the management of healthcare costs, which have the potential of bankrupting Western economies. This in turn results in the geostrategic importance of controlling a country's own pharmaceutical supply chains and have production either domestically or in friendly partner countries, removing any adversarial aspects in the greater context of globalized decoupling. The countries that most effectively manage their demographic crisis and healthcare costs of their aging populations will have more stability, more economic activity, and are able to spend more consistently on their military to keep the country in a state of higher readiness to take on global challenges in an uncertain world. Now, before you start panic buying aspirin, let's break down what this act really means, who stands to win, who's about to get a very expensive headache, and what it can mean for filling your next prescription. So grab your lab coats and your reading glasses, because we're about to do a deep dive into the world of international pharma politics. Trust me, by the end of this video, you'll be the most interesting person at your next bougie dinner party, or possibly on the FBI watch list. Either way, you're welcome. I'm your host for Apprentice.io's Industry Insights, Frank Maggiore, and today we're diving headfirst into the political quagmire of the BIOSECURE Act, where protectionist national security meets drug development and things can go off the rails fairly quickly. We're just hoping this doesn't escalate tensions to World War III. Because of the sensitive nature of this topic, I feel I need to preface this discussion with saying that I am an American that lives in the US. I worked in laboratories and in the pharmaceutical industry for most of my life. I have very close relationships with international as well as my Chinese colleagues and friends who I've met along the way. I've done business in China. I built up close ties over the decades. I love the people, the culture, and the food, not just the Americanized Chinese food, but the real deal local Chinese food. This video is in no way attacking the people of China or the people of Chinese descent living here in the US. There's already way too much anti-Asian and xenophobic rhetoric going around here in the US, particularly during an election year. With that out of the way, we're diving headfirst into the BIOSECURE Act, a piece of legislation that's got the pharma industry buzzing louder than a hive of caffeinated bees. Let's set the stage, shall we? Picture this. It's a chilly January day in Washington, D.C., and a bipartisan group of lawmakers decides to drop a legislative bombshell that could reshape the entire landscape of drug manufacturing and biotech research. Enter the BIOSECURE Act, a bill with a name that sounds like it was cooked up from a Hollywood writer's room for the next big pharma thriller. So what's the deal with BIOSECURE? Well, in a nutshell, it's Uncle Sam's way of saying, hey China, hands off our DNA. The act aims to prohibit U.S. federal agencies from contracting with or funding companies that use biotechnology services or equipment from certain Chinese firms. We're talking big names here, WuXi AppTec, the BGI Group, and their subsidiaries. These aren't just any companies, they're the heavyweights of Chinese biotech, the kinds of firms that Big Pharma has been cozying up to for years. Now you might be wondering, why all the fuss? Isn't global collaboration the name of the game in science? Well, dear listeners, that's where things get spicier than a Hot Ones Final Dab challenge. The U.S. government claims, and I stress claims because we're dealing with classified intel here, that these Chinese firms are basically data vampires, sucking up Americans' genetic information and sending it straight to Beijing. Is it true? Is it paranoia? Is it a bit of both? We can't say for sure, but it's got everyone from big pharma CEOs to biotech startups sweating bullets. But wait, there's more. This isn't just about protecting Aunt Mildred's 23andMe results. The BIOSECURE Act is like a wrecking ball aimed at the global pharmaceutical supply chain. For years, U.S. drug makers have been outsourcing manufacturing and R&D to China to take advantage of reduced labor costs and access to a large supply of STEM PhDs. Now, with a stroke of a pen, Congress is threatening to turn that cozy relationship into a long-distance one. Very, very long distance. So how do we get here? We're about to take a whirlwind tour of U.S.-China relations with a special stop in the land of pills and needles. For years, the U.S. and China have been engaged in geopolitical tango that's part courtship, part boxing match. In the pharma world, this dance has been particularly interesting. On one hand, U.S. companies have been loving the cheap manufacturing, research opportunities in China, and access to the enormous Chinese market. On the other hand, there's been growing concern about intellectual property theft, data security, and the small matter of China's ambitions to dominate the biotech industry. Then came the COVID-19 pandemic, which was like pouring gasoline on a smoldering fire. Suddenly, everyone realized just how dependent the U.S. was on Chinese manufacturing for critical drugs and medical supplies. Cue the panic, the finger pointing, and the inevitable calls for bringing manufacturing back home. Fast forward to 2024, and tensions are higher than a lab rat on experimental stimulants. The U.S. government is increasingly viewing China's biotech advances not just as economic competition, but as a potential national security threat. Enter the BIOSECURE Act. Now, the bill has just passed the House of Representatives. It's got bipartisan support because nothing brings politicians together like a good old-fashioned external threat. And it's headed for the Senate. If it passes and gets signed into law, let's just say it could turn the pharmaceutical industry upside down with implications of global supply chain disruptions. So that's the basic overview of the BIOSECURE Act in all its controversial glory. Is it a necessary step to protect American innovation and national security, or is it a short-sighted move that could cripple drug development, create dire drug shortages, and send drug prices skyrocketing? That's what we're here to unpack today. So stick around as we dive deeper into the nitty-gritty of this act, explore its potential impacts, and try to figure out what it means for the future of global pharma. Let's get this chemical reaction started. All right, it's time to put on our legislative lab coats and dissect this BIOSECURE Act like it's a particularly intriguing lab specimen. Let's start with the meat and potatoes of this legislative feast. The BIOSECURE Act, in essence, is telling U.S. government agencies thou shalt not do business with certain Chinese biotech firms. But it's not just as simple as a no Chinese takeout policy. Oh no, it's more complex than an organic chemistry final. First things first, let's talk about what BIOSECURE actually stands for. It's not just a catchy name, it's an acronym. Well, technically it's a backronym since they probably came up with the name BIOSECURE Act first. Anyways, it probably took some poor congressional intern hours to come up with it, but it stands for Blocking Investments of Security Concern with Unsafe Research Entities. That's quite a mouthful, isn't it? It's like they were playing legislative Scrabble and they decided to use all their letters all at once. Now, the heart of this act is about prohibiting federal agencies from contracting with or funding companies that use biotechnology equipment or services from certain Chinese firm. It's like telling your kids you can't play with the neighbor's toys because you don't trust the neighbor. First up, the act specifically names 5 companies that are about as welcome in the U.S. government contracts as a skunk at a perfume convention. We're talking about BGI, MGI, Complete Genomics, WuXi AppTec, and any of their subsidiaries or affiliates. If you're not familiar with these names, they're the heavy hitters of Chinese biotech. Think of them as Amazon, Google, and Apple of Chinese biotechnology. They're big players, and this act is essentially showing them the door. But wait, there's more. The act doesn't stop there. It also includes a broader definition of biotechnology companies of concern. This is basically a fancy way of saying, if we think you're in cahoots with the foreign adversary's government, military, or intelligence agencies, you're on our naughty list. It's like Santa's list, but instead of cold, you get barred from lucrative government contracts. Ho ho, oh no. Now let's talk timeline, because this isn't happening overnight. The act gives companies a bit of breathing room. Think of it as a grace period for biotech breakups. For the 5 named companies, the restrictions kick in 60 days after the Office of Management and Budget issues its implementing guidance. For all other companies of concern, it's 180 days. So it's not quite pack your bags and get out, but it's more like start packing and maybe cancel your lease. But here's where it gets interesting. The act includes a grandfather clause that allows existing contracts to continue until 2032. It's like telling companies, we're breaking up, but we can still be friends for about 8 more years. Then we can't talk anymore. This is crucial because it gives pharma companies time to find new dance partners for their biotech tango. Now let's talk about impact, because this isn't just about a few government contracts. This act could reshape the entire landscape of U.S. biotech funding. Any company that wants to keep its government funding or contracts will need to cut ties with these Chinese firms. And we're not just talking about direct contacts. If you are subcontracting to a company that uses services from WuXi or BGI, sorry, you're out too. Now, what exactly counts as biotechnology equipment or services? Well, the act casts a net wider than a fisherman with aspirations of world domination. We're talking about any equipment used in biological research, development, or analysis. This includes things like genetic sequencers, mass spectrometers, or even software designed for these machines. It's like they're trying to cover everything from petri dishes to supercomputers. The act also targets services related to biological materials. This includes research, development, production, and even data storage and transmission. Basically, if it's got anything to do with studying, manipulating, or storing information about living things, it's on the radar. The act also gives the executive branch some wiggle room with waiver authorities. They can make exceptions on a case-by-case basis, but they need to justify it to Congress within 30 days. It's like asking for permission to stay out past curfew. You can do it, but you better have a good explanation ready. Sure, it looks the same, but will it work? The potential ripple effects are enormous. Think about all the academic research funded by government grants, all those biotech startups relying on small business innovation research program funds, all those big pharma companies with juicy government contracts. They all need to take a long, hard look at their supply chains and research partnerships. And it's not just about losing access to cheap manufacturing or cutting-edge research tools. This act could potentially cut off access to valuable data and expertise. It's like telling scientists they can't use some of their favorite lab equipment anymore. Sure, they can find alternatives, but it might slow things down and drive up costs. Speaking of costs, let's not forget about potential impact on drug prices. If companies have to scramble to find new manufacturers or research partners, these costs could very well be passed on to consumers. The fallout from the BIOSECURE Act will be like watching a high-stakes game of biotech Jenga, but instead of wooden blocks, we're dealing with pills, vials, and multi-billion-dollar drugs. And the BIOSECURE Act just pulled out one of the load-bearing pieces. We're all holding our breath to see what happens when those pieces start moving. So there you have it, the BIOSECURE Act in all its legislative glory. It's a complex piece of legislation that's about to shake up the biotech world like a snow globe in an earthquake. Will it protect American innovation and national security as intended, or will it throw a wrench into the gears of global scientific collaboration? Now we're wading into waters murkier than a contaminated petri dish. On one side, we've got Uncle Sam clutching his intel reports, eyes narrowed with suspicion. On the other, we've got Big Pharma, arms full of cost spreadsheets and drug pipelines, looking increasingly nervous. Welcome to the BIOSECURE Tightrope Act. Let's face it, the government's concerns aren't exactly pulled out of thin air. China's been playing the long game in biotech, and their military-civil fusion strategy isn't exactly a state secret. They're trying to build a biotech industry behemoth that's aimed at market domination. The fear is real. What if all that juicy genetic data and cutting-edge research ends up in the hands of the Chinese military? But here's the rub. The pharma industry has been doing the biotech equivalent of outsourcing your IT to that guy who works for peanuts and always delivers on time. Chinese firms like WuXi AppTec aren't just cheap labor, they're innovation powerhouses. Cutting them off is like telling Iron Man he can't use his suit anymore. Sure, he's still a genius inventor, billionaire, playboy, philanthropist, like myself, but things are going to get a lot harder for him. Us. So how do we thread this needle? It's trickier than performing brain surgery while riding a unicycle. The government wants to protect national security, but they also don't want to kneecap one of America's most innovative industries. Pharma companies want to keep their competitive edge, but they also don't want to be accused of being China's unwitting biotech mules. One potential solution is to create a more nuanced approach. Instead of a blanket ban, how about a tiered system? Low-risk collaborations get the green light. Medium-risk ones get extra scrutiny, and high-risk ones are off the table. It's like the biotech traffic light system. Green means go, yellow means caution, red means stop and find a new research partner. If only online dating worked that way. Another idea is to invest heavily in building up domestic capabilities. If the government is so worried about relying on Chinese biotech, how about throwing some serious cash at homegrown alternatives? It's easier to catch more flies with honey than trying to beat them with a legislative stick. It's like deciding to grow your own fruits and vegetables because you became a supermarket conspiracy theorist. Wake up, sheeple. These bananas are agents of the Banana Republic, here to establish a new world order. They're trying to make us slip up. Well, I'm not falling for their curved schemes. I'll grow my own bananas to peel back the layers of this conspiracy. And let's not forget about the international cooperation that doesn't involve China. India, South Korea, and European countries all have robust biotech sectors. Maybe it's time to swipe right on some new international research partners. It's like speed dating, but for science. The key here is flexibility and ongoing dialogue. The BIOSECURE Act shouldn't be a one-and-done deal. It needs to be a living document, adaptable to the breakneck pace of biotech innovation and geopolitical shifts. Regular check-ins between industry leaders and national security folks should become more common for pharma executives. Because let's face it, in the world of biotech, today's national security threat could be tomorrow's cure for cancer. We need to find a way to stay safe without shutting ourselves off from global innovation. It's a delicate balance, like mixing volatile chemicals. Get it right, and you've got a breakthrough. Get it wrong, and well, let's just say, you might not have fingers. Let's start with the elephant in the room, or should I say, the dragon. For years, Big Pharma has been cozying up to Chinese manufacturers. We're talking about everything from active pharmaceutical ingredients, APIs, to finished drug products. It's like China became the world's medicine cabinet, and we've all been reaching in for discount aspirin. Just how deep does this reliance go? Well, grab onto something sturdy because these numbers are about to make you dizzy. According to the FDA estimates, about 80% of active pharmaceutical ingredients used in U.S. drugs come from overseas, with China and India being the major players. It's like we've outsourced our entire medicine-making cookbook. But it's not just about manufacturing. China's also become a hotbed for pharmaceutical R&D as well. Companies like WuXi AppTec aren't just churning out pills, they're driving innovation faster than a DeLorean hitting 88 miles per hour. They've got more high-tech labs, and they're pumping out data faster than Twitter during a celebrity meltdown, and I refuse to call it X. Now enter the BIOSECURE Act. It's like someone's about to yank the tablecloth out from under this carefully arranged pharma feast. And there's a real chance some of the dishes are going to crash to the floor. The BIOSECURE Act, ready to play its role as disruptor-in-chief, and I don't mean the Silicon Valley move fast and break things kind, I mean the oh no, where's my life-saving medication kind. If U.S. companies have to suddenly cut ties with Chinese partners, we're looking at potential delays in drug development that can make a DMV line look speedy. Imagine you're a scientist working on the next big cancer drug. You've been collaborating with a lab in China that's got some whiz-bang technology you need. Suddenly, poof, collaboration's off limits. It's like telling a chef they can't use salt anymore. Sure, they'll find alternatives, but it's going to take time, and the results might not quite be the same. And it's not just about fancy new drugs. Even your garden variety generics could be in trouble. A lot of those cheap pills that keep grandma's blood pressure in check, yeah, they might be coming from China. If that supply chain gets disrupted, we could be looking at drug shortages that would make the great toilet paper crisis of 2020 look like a walk in the park. Now let's talk about the money, honey, because in the end, that's what makes the pharma world go round. Shifting manufacturing and R&D away from China, that's going to cost more than a designer handbag made of solid gold. Companies will need to find new partners, build new facilities, and maybe even bring manufacturing back to the U.S. It's like trying to turn an ocean liner on a dime. It's possible, but it's going to take time, money, and probably a few seasick passengers. And guess who's likely to end up footing the bill for all this? If you guessed the consumer, give yourself a gold star. Drug prices, already a touchy subject, could skyrocket faster than a SpaceX rocket. It's enough to give you a headache, which is ironic because prices of headache medicine might be going up as well. But wait, there's more. Isn't there always in pharma? We need to talk about potential drug shortages. If companies fumble the supply chain shuffle, we could be looking at empty pharmacy shelves. It's like musical chairs, but instead of the music stopping, it's your medication supply. Certain drugs could be particularly vulnerable. Antibiotics, for instance. A lot of those come from China. Imagine a world where a simple infection becomes a big problem because the meds aren't available. It's like going back to the medical dark ages, but with smartphones. And let's not forget about emerging health threats. In case anyone forgot, as if we could, we just went through a global pandemic. Guess where a lot of our emergency medical supplies came from during that crisis? That's right, China. Cutting off that supply chain could leave us woefully unprepared for the next big health scare, particularly with H5N1 lurking in the background of U.S. farms. And that's farms with an F, not a PH, but whatever. It's like getting rid of your umbrella because you don't like the color right before a huge storm hits. So what's a poor pharma company to do? Well, they're going to have to get creative and fast. We're talking about diversifying supply chains, investing in domestic manufacturing, maybe even cozying up to new international partners. India, anyone? It's like speed dating, but for drug manufacturing. Some companies are already ahead of the curve. They saw which way geopolitical winds were blowing and started to make their moves. Companies with a large presence in China, it may require two completely different supply chains, one for the US and Europe, and a completely separate one for Asia, where companies like AstraZeneca are already preparing to do just that. Further, there may need to be bifurcation of the companies into separate legal entities to avoid running afoul of the requirements of the BIOSECURE Act and potential U.S. government reimbursements from Medicare and Medicaid. Others, well, they're about to get a rude awakening, like someone who's hit the snooze button one too many times. In the end, the BIOSECURE Act could just be the push that finally forces pharma to rebuild its rickety global supply chain house of cards. It'll be painful, it'll be expensive, but it might just result in a more resilient system. Or it can be a complete disaster. Either way, it's going to be one heck of a show. All right, let's dive into the pharma industry's reaction to the BIOSECURE Act. So what's been Big Pharma's response? Well, it's a mixed bag of panic, wait and see, strategic planning, and some good old-fashioned lobbying. Behind closed doors, you can bet there are more emergency meetings than a hospital during a pandemic. Public statements are cautious, of course. It's all, we're evaluating the situation, and we remain committed to patient safety. Translation, holy moly, how do we fix this without admitting we're all freaking out? Some companies are already ahead of the game. They saw the writing on the Great Wall, so to speak, and started diversifying years ago. These are the smarty pants of the pharma world, the ones who always have Plan A, Plan B, Plan C, and D, with diversified supply chains and qualified backups to the backups. They're sitting pretty, watching their competitors scramble like it's a Black Friday going out of business sale. Others, well, they're in for a rude awakening. It's like they've been happily swimming in the cheap manufacturing pool, and suddenly someone's drained all the water. These companies are now going to be frantically searching for alternatives. Let's talk about strategy, shall we? First up, diversification. It's the new buzzword in pharma boardrooms, right up there with synergy and blockchain. Companies are looking at spreading their manufacturing eggs into many baskets. India's looking pretty good right now. It's like the industry collectively decided, hey, if we can't date China anymore, maybe India's free this Saturday. Then there's the push for domestic manufacturing. Suddenly, making drugs in the USA is back in vogue. It's like bell-bottom jeans, but for pharmaceutical production. Companies are dusting off their old facilities, building new ones, and generally trying to bring sexy back to American drug manufacturing. But here's the kicker. It's not just about where you make the drugs. It's about the whole supply chain, from the raw materials to the API, to the equipment that makes it, to the software that manages it, to get that pill into your medicine cabinet. Some companies are going full vertical integration. They're becoming the Amazon of drug production, controlling everything from start to finish. It's like they're building their own pharma empires, complete with separate subsidiaries to sew their white lab coat uniforms. Now let's not forget about automation and AI. If you can't use cheap labor, maybe onshoring and robotics are going to be the answer. Companies are investing in smart factories faster than you can say Skynet. It's like they're trying to build the T-1000 of drug manufacturing. Efficient, tireless, and hopefully not too homicidal. But wait, there's more. Some clever cookies are looking at new technologies altogether. Things like continuous manufacturing, 3D printing of drugs, you name it. It's like they're trying to reinvent the wheel, but the wheel is a pill, and it's being made by a machine that looks like it belongs in a sci-fi movie. Now, while Big Pharma is doing its best impression of a doomsday prepper, stockpiling alternatives and building metaphorical bunkers, let's spare a thought for the little guys, our plucky biotech startups. For them, the BIOSECURE Act isn't just a speed bump, it's Mount Everest. These smaller biotech companies often rely heavily on Chinese partners for everything from CRO research to CMO manufacturing. They just don't have the deep pockets to suddenly shift gears and build their own facilities. It's like telling a kid with a lemonade stand that now they need to source their lemons from organic, fair trade, non-China suppliers. Good luck with that, kiddo. For many of these startups, their entire business model might be built around collaborations that might soon be off limits. The smarter small biotechs are scrambling to form new partnerships, looking for academic collaborations or cozying up with bigger pharma companies for protection. It's like watching a bunch of small fish trying to buddy up with sharks for safety. Risky and potentially life-saving in the short term until Big Pharma decides to take a bite. Others are pivoting and reevaluating their pipelines, focusing on projects that don't rely on soon-to-be forbidden collaborations. It's like watching real-time evolution, but instead of adapting to a new environment, they're adapting to new legislation. And let's not forget the funding aspect. Venture capitalists and investors are watching this situation like hawks. Some see opportunity, a chance to back companies that can fill in the gaps left by the exodus from China. Others are getting cold feet worrying about backing a biotech that might suddenly find itself without a critical partner. In the end, the industry's reaction to the BIOSECURE Act is a mix of panic, innovation, and good old-fashioned ingenuity. It's forcing companies, both big and small, to rethink their entire approach to drug development and production. Some will thrive, adapting to the new reality with the grace of a gymnast, and others might stumble, unable to stick the landing in this new China-free routine. The road ahead is bumpy, but it's sure to be an interesting ride. Just remember to refill those prescriptions before things get too crazy around here. All right, let's zoom out and look at the BIOSECURE Act from a global perspective. It's like we've just tossed a boulder into the pond of international pharma, and the ripples, they're turning into tsunamis. First up, let's talk about China. You think they're just going to sit back and accept this biotech breakup? Ha! China's response could range from diplomatic huffing and puffing to full-on retaliation. We might see them tightening the screws on U.S. companies operating in China faster than you can say trade war. Imagine this, China decides to play hardball and restricts exports of key pharmaceutical ingredients. Suddenly, the global supply of certain drugs could be squeezed tighter than your belt after a Thanksgiving dinner. It's not just hypothetical. China's done similar things with rare earth metals before. Who's to say drugs couldn't be next? Or that they could use a menu of options to restrict certain key materials where China currently has dominant market share. But it's not just about tit-for-tat retaliation. China's been gunning to become the world's biotech superpower. The BIOSECURE Act, it might just light a fire under their already scorching ambitions. We could see China doubling down on domestic innovation, pumping more money into R&D than a tech billionaire into his space hobby. The result? A biotech arms race that makes the space race look like a leisurely stroll. Now, let's not forget about the other players on this global chessboard. Countries like India, South Korea, and Singapore are probably rubbing their hands together with glee. It's like they've just been handed a Get Into U.S. Pharma free card. We might see a gold rush of sorts, with these countries vying to become the new go-to for U.S. pharma manufacturing and research collaborations. India, in particular, is poised to be the big winner. They've already got a robust generics industry and a growing biotech sector. With China out of the picture, India could become the new darling of U.S. pharma. It's like they're the understudy who's finally getting their big break on Broadway. But India needs to overcome quality and trust issues, where every week some company is getting a 483 from the FDA for keeping 2 sets of books for the batch records and is caught shredding them. This is better than in China, where FDA inspectors are openly refusing to perform in-person inspections at sites in China for fear of being arrested if they're going to report major quality issues about the company. They don't want to become stuck in the middle of a geopolitical mess created by 2 opposing governments trying to exert dominance, where the people in between suffer while they're just trying to do their jobs. But it's not all sunshine and rainbows for these potential beneficiaries. The BIOSECURE Act sets a precedent that probably has every other country nervous. Today it's China, but who's to say that other countries won't be next? And who's to say that other countries with a protectionist streak in government doesn't attempt the same thing here in trying to grow their domestic pharmaceutical supply chains, not with carrots, but with sticks of legislative actions, which could backfire when the policy made by people who are not scientists or industry experts don't think through all the conceivable outcomes. Now let's talk about the impact of international collaborations in life sciences. Spoiler alert, it's not pretty. The BIOSECURE Act is like taking a wrecking ball to the intricate web of global scientific cooperation that we've built up over the past few decades. Think about all those joint research projects, academic exchanges, and collaborative clinical trials. Many of them could screech to a halt faster than a teen driver at their first stop sign. We're talking about potential delays in groundbreaking research from cancer treatments to rare disease therapies. It's like we're telling scientists that have collaborated globally for decades, sorry, you can't play with your best friends anymore because the grown-ups are fighting. The impact could be particularly harsh in cutting-edge fields like genomics and AI-driven drug discovery. These areas thrive on the free flow of ideas and data across borders. With the BIOSECURE Act, it's like we're building a wall in the middle of the information superhighway. And let's not forget about global health initiatives. Many of these rely on collaboration between US and Chinese researchers. What happens to projects tackling global threats like antibiotic research or preparing for the next pandemic? It's like we're disarming ourselves in the face of microscopic enemies that don't care about national borders. Now on to the seismic shifts in the global pharmaceutical manufacturing landscape. We're about to witness a reshuffling that would make a Vegas card dealer jealous. The exodus from China isn't just going to create a vacuum, it's going to redraw the entire map of where our drugs come from. We're likely going to see a diversification that spreads across multiple countries. It's like pharma companies are suddenly embracing the don't put all your eggs in one basket philosophy with religious fervor. Countries with established pharma industries like India, Ireland, and Singapore could see a boom, particularly Ireland since the UK left the EU, and Ireland is the sole primary English language speaking country in the EU and has an already flourishing pharmaceutical manufacturing base. But we might also see some dark horse candidates emerge. Vietnam, Mexico, Poland, Indonesia, Malaysia. The race to become the next pharma manufacturing hub is on, and it's anyone's game. But here's the kicker. The shift isn't just about geography, it's about the technology too. The BIOSECURE Act might just be a kick in the pants to the industry that needs to revolutionize how drugs are made. We could see a surge in investment in things like automation-driven processes, lights-out pharma manufacturing, where the robotics do all the work in facilities that literally operate in the dark because robots don't need the lights on. Continuous manufacturing, 3D printing of drugs, and AI production processes. It's like we're fast-forwarding the pharma industry into a sci-fi future where robots make our meds and quality control is all done by AI. And let's not forget about the potential for reshoring. The idea of bringing drug manufacturing back to the US is suddenly sexier than a lab coat on a supermodel. We might see a renaissance of domestic pharma production, complete with shiny new high-tech facilities popping up, or a reassertion of locations like Puerto Rico as a low-cost provider for pharma manufacturing that exists within territorial US, but where wages continue to be lower. But all this comes at a cost, reshuffling global supply chains, building new manufacturing facilities, investing in cutting-edge tech. It all adds up. And guess who's likely to foot the bill? That's right, the end consumer. We might be looking at drug prices that make your current copays look like pocket change. The BIOSECURE Act isn't just rewriting the rules for US pharma, it's shaking up the entire global life sciences ecosystem. It's like we're watching a real-time experiment in geopolitics, economics, and scientific collaboration, all rolled into one. All right, let's dive into the world of alphabet soup, CMOs, CDMOs, and CROs. The BIOSECURE Act is about to shake up these organizations like a bartender with a premium cocktail shaker. First up, let's talk about WuXi AppTec and their subsidiary WuXi Biologics as the fourth largest CMO in the world. This Chinese giant is about to get the cold shoulder from Uncle Sam. We're talking about a company that's been a go-to for big pharma looking for cost-effective manufacturing. Now, they're basically persona non grata in the US market. It's like the popular kid in school suddenly gets banned from all the cool parties. But here's where it gets interesting. WuXi isn't just going to curl up into a ball and cry. Oh no, they're likely going to put on a classic, you can't fire me, I quit move. We're talking about a massive shift of their manufacturing capacity to Asia, Africa, and other regions. The Middle East? Don't be surprised if it becomes a new hotspot for drug manufacturing, particularly taking oil money from sovereign wealth funds and investing into CMO agreements with Chinese companies for production of medications for domestic and regional usage. Saudi Arabia and the UAE are looking to invest heavily into pharmaceutical manufacturing to become dominant players in the region. The BIOSECURE Act could send Chinese firms into their arms and wallets to build out a more comprehensive and robust regional infrastructure. This could lead to a fascinating twist, increase access to medicines in developing markets. It's like WuXi is saying, fine, America doesn't want us, we'll take our ball and play in a different playground. And that playground might just end up with better slides and swings if you catch my drift. There is also a very good possibility that WuXi sells off its existing U.S. assets or divests it into U.S.-based organizations prior to the 2032 deadline, allowing the U.S. manufacturing capacity to still exist with the same workers. So the U.S. capacity just doesn't evaporate and go away, it just changes the name. They slap on an enormous American flag on the building, call it a day. And those politicians, they get to take photo ops and smile for all the good work they did for the American people, where in reality, not much is actually changing. Now let's shift gears to Catalent, the third largest CMO globally. Catalent is currently in the process of being scooped up by Novo Holdings like a kid grabbing the last cookie in the jar. But hold your horses, the FTC is eyeing this deal like a suspicious parent. If it goes through, we're looking at a seismic shift in the CMO landscape. Imagine this, Catalent, a major player in the CMO world where they continue to fulfill current manufacturing agreements and obligations, but new capacity goes to manufacturing of Novo Nordisk anti-obesity gold mines, Ozempic and Wegovy. It's like having a star quarterback preferentially throw passes to their favorite receiver. This double whammy of WuXi exiting stage left and Catalent potentially becoming Novo's personal manufacturing butler could squeeze the global supply chain. We're talking about a capacity crunch at the same time other anti-obesity medications are coming online. And what happens when anti-obesity medications move from biologics to small molecule drugs? With Viking Therapeutics drug VK2735 and Novo Nordisk amycretin as a small molecule anti-obesity medications working their way through clinical trials, after they are approved, the floodgates will be open as cheaper, more mass-produced solutions for anti-obesity drugs are available that don't require people with phobias of needles to stick themselves regularly. This will upend small molecule manufacturing and production as new patients are onboarded, and the manufacturing of these wonder drugs will displace already existing capacity for small molecule manufacturing currently used for generics and for clinical drug supplies. This disruption will require additional small molecule manufacturing capacity to come online, which is easier and cheaper than biologics, but a new workforce will need to be trained up to support these new pharmaceutical manufacturing facilities, likely which will be set up in places with cheaper labor and no existing pharmaceutical infrastructure like what exists currently in Boston, New Jersey, Research Triangle Park in North Carolina, and California. For the pharma companies left scrambling, it's going to be like musical chairs, but instead of chairs, it's manufacturing capacity, and the music is about to stop. We might see a mad dash to secure partnerships with the remaining CMOs, which could lead to CMOs gaining more power in the industry overall. It's going to be like Black Friday shopping, but instead of fighting over discounted TVs, it's a scramble for who gets to manufacture their drugs. This squeeze could lead to some interesting developments. We might see more pharma companies deciding to bring manufacturing in-house. It's like they're saying, if you want to do something right, or at all, you need to do it yourself. You're already seeing Eli Lilly with this tactic, investing $12 billion in new facility construction and expansion globally between the US, Ireland, and Germany. This could lead to a real boom in new manufacturing facilities popping up faster than daisies during spring. But let's not forget about the little guys, the smaller biotech companies. For them, the CMO crunch could be like trying to find a taxi in New York during rush hour in the rain. They might find themselves priced out or simply unable to find manufacturing partners. It could potentially stifle innovation, with promising drugs getting stuck in development limbo. On the flip side, the situation could be a golden opportunity for up-and-coming CMOs. We might see a new generation of contract manufacturers rising to fill the gap, like ambitious understudies finally getting their shot at the lead role. Countries like India, Ireland, and even some in Eastern Europe could see a boom in their CMO sectors. I'm still waiting to see who can come out as the Uber for pharmaceutical CMO manufacturing, matching existing capacity from CMOs with companies that require pharmaceutical manufacturing services, where prices are transparent and quality, expertise, and experience are all search options to prioritize. Nobody has gotten this right up until now, but expect more digital innovation tools being utilized in the industry. And let's not forget about CROs, contract research organizations. With WuXi AppTec out of the picture, we're not just losing manufacturing capacity, but also a significant player in drug discovery and development. This could lead to a major reshuffling in the CRO world. In the end, the BIOSECURE Act induced shakeup in the CMO, CDMO, and CRO world is going to be like watching a high-stakes game of industrial Tetris. Some pieces will fit perfectly, while others will leave gaping holes. One thing's for sure, the global pharma manufacturing landscape is in for one wild ride. So grab onto your hard hats. This construction zone is about to get real interesting. All right, let's zoom out and look at the BIOSECURE Act through the lens of the broader US-China relationship. First off, let's set the scene. The US and China have been doing this geopolitical tango for years now, and it's about as graceful as two left-footed dancers at their high school prom. We've seen trade wars, tech wars, and now, ladies and gentlemen, we're witnessing the rise of the biotech wars. It's like the world's two biggest economies decided regular wars are just too passé and decided to duke it out over DNA sequencers and pill presses instead. The BIOSECURE Act isn't just another jab in this ongoing spat. Oh no, it's more like a haymaker thrown right at China's biotech ambitions. It's as if Uncle Sam looked at China's Made in China 2025 plan and said, not with my genes, you don't. We're talking about a move that could potentially kneecap China's aspirations to become the world's biotech superpower. This act isn't happening in a vacuum. It's more like a cherry on top of a sundae of tensions. We've already seen the US put the squeeze on Chinese tech companies like Huawei and ZTE. We've also witnessed the great chip war with the US trying to cut China off from the most advanced semiconductors in the world, like a parent changing their Netflix password. The BIOSECURE Act is just the latest episode in this ongoing geopolitical soap opera. Now let's talk about retaliation, because you can bet your bottom yuan that China isn't going to take this lying down. They've got more cards up their sleeves than a magician at a Las Vegas show. We could see anything from tit-for-tat measures against U.S. biotech firms operating in China to broader economic retaliation. Imagine this: China could decide to play hardball and restrict exports of key pharmaceutical ingredients, but it doesn't stop there. China could also ramp up its own domestic biotech industry. We might see a biotech arms race that makes the space race look like a leisurely stroll in the park. It's like both countries are saying, anything you can bioengineer, I can bioengineer better. And let's not forget about the potential for cyber retaliation. In today's world, warfare isn't just fought with guns and bombs, but with ones and zeros. We could see an uptick in cyber attacks targeting U.S. biotech firms, with Chinese hackers trying to swipe valuable research data. Now here's where things get real interesting, or terrifying depending on your perspective. This escalation in the biotech realm could spill over into other areas of U.S.-China relations. Trade talks, they might get frostier than a polar bear's picnic. Diplomatic relations, we might need to thaw them out with a blowtorch. It's like watching a couple spat turn into a full-blown family feud. But the real tragedy in all this, the potential long-term consequences for global scientific collaboration. Science at its core is about the free exchange of ideas. It's about researchers from different corners of the globe coming together to tackle humanity's greatest challenges. The BIOSECURE Act, it's like building a wall right through the middle of a scientific community's favorite playground. Think about all the joint research projects, academic exchanges, and collaborative clinical trials that could be affected. We're talking about the potential delays in groundbreaking research from cancer to rare disease therapies. The impact could be particularly harsh in cutting-edge fields like genomics and AI-driven discovery. These areas thrive on the free flow of ideas and data across borders. With the BIOSECURE Act, it's like we're building a dam in the middle of the information river. And let's not forget about global health initiatives. Many of these rely on collaboration between U.S. and Chinese researchers. In the long run, this could lead to a bifurcation in the global scientific community. Imagine a world where we have US-aligned research and China-aligned research with limited crossover. It's like creating two parallel scientific universes. Sure, competition can drive innovation, but it can also lead to duplication of efforts and slower overall progress. Moreover, the split could have ripple effects across the entire educational system. We might see fewer Chinese students coming to study at US universities and vice versa. The brain drain could flow in unexpected directions, reshaping the global landscape of scientific talent. But here's a wild thought. Could this tension actually spur innovation in unexpected ways? History's shown us that competition, even adversarial competition, could sometimes drive progress. Maybe this biotech Cold War will lead to breakthroughs we can't even imagine yet. It's like the space race all over again, but instead of putting a man on the moon, we're trying to cure cancer or extend human lifespan. In the end, the BIOSECURE Act isn't just about protecting American biotech interests. It's a move that could reshape the entire landscape of global scientific cooperation. It's like we're playing a high-stakes game of chess, but the pieces are DNA strand and the board is the entire world. Whether this leads to a new era of siloed scientific process or eventually forces both sides back to the collaboration table, one thing's for sure: the world of global scientific cooperation will never be the same. All right, we've taken quite the roller coaster ride through the twists and turns of the BIOSECURE Act. Now it's time to step off, catch our breath, and figure out what the heck we just experienced. So let's wrap this up like a pharmacist with a prescription, carefully, thoroughly, and with an eye on the fine print. First up, let's talk about the key takeaways for our friends in Big Pharma and the brave souls investing in this biotech Wild West. If there's one thing you should tattoo on your brain after this whole saga, it's this: diversification isn't just a fancy word for your stock portfolio anymore. It's the name of the game for pharmaceutical supply chains as well. Companies that have been treating China like their one-stop shop for all things biotech are in for a rude awakening. It's like they've been eating at the same all-you-can-eat buffet for years, and suddenly the health inspector's shutting it down. Time to find new restaurants, and fast. For the smart cookies in pharma, this means spreading your manufacturing eggs into many baskets. India, Singapore, Ireland, heck, even the good old US of A might start looking attractive again. It's like playing geopolitical Monopoly, but instead of hotels, you're building pharmaceutical manufacturing plants. Investors, listen up. The biotech landscape is shifting faster than a chameleon on a disco floor. Keep your eyes peeled for companies with robust, diversified supply chains. They're going to be the tortoises in this race, slow and steady, while the China-dependent hares might be taking an unexpected nap. Now let's not forget about our plucky little biotech startups. For them, the BIOSECURE Act isn't just a speed bump, it's Mount Everest. These smaller companies often heavily rely on Chinese partners for everything from research to manufacturing. They're going to need to get creative faster than an improv comedian on espresso. Watch for startups pivoting to new partnerships or novel technologies. They're the adaptable little mammals scurrying around while the big pharma dinosaurs trying to figure out which way is up. Now let's talk about the grand balancing act between national security and innovation. It's like trying to juggle flaming torches while riding a unicycle. Exciting to watch, but you wouldn't want to try it at home. The BIOSECURE Act is waving the flag of national security, and let's be honest, they've got a point. In a world where data is the new oil, protecting Americans' genetic information is about as crucial as guarding Fort Knox. But here's the rub. Science thrives on collaboration, on the free exchange of ideas. It's like trying to have a conversation with your mouth taped shut. Sure, you can do it, but it's not pretty, and it's certainly not efficient. So what's the solution? Well, it's going to require more finesse than the brain surgeon playing operation. We need smart, nuanced policies that protect sensitive data without building a great wall around American science. It's about creating secure channels for collaboration, not shutting them down entirely. Think of it like a scientific version of a James Bond movie. We need to create secure drop points and secret handshakes for our researchers, not lock them in a bunker. For pharmaceutical companies and researchers, this means getting savvy about data security. It's going to be a brave new world of encrypted data transfers, secure cloud storage, and maybe even some good old-fashioned spy versus spy tradecraft. But who knows, maybe invisible ink will make a comeback in lab notebooks. Now let's gaze into our crystal ball and see what we should be watching for as the BIOSECURE Act progresses. First and foremost, keep your eyes on the Senate. Will they pass the act as is, or will they try to water it down more than a bartender trying to stretch out that last bit of good whiskey? Watch for amendments and carve-outs. You can bet your bottom dollar that lobbyists are working overtime to soften the blow for their clients. We might see exceptions for certain types of research or certain companies. It's like watching a high-stakes game of Mother May I, but with billions of dollars on the line this time. Also, keep an ear to the ground for international reactions. How will China respond? Will we see retaliatory measures that make the current trade war look like a playground spat? And what about other countries? Will they see this as an opportunity to fill in the gap left by China, or will they be wary of getting caught in the crossfire? Don't forget to watch the stock market. Biotech stocks might be in for a wild ride, bumpier than a Mad Max car chase. Companies with significant exposure to China could see their values drop faster than a lead balloon, while those with diversified supply chains might suddenly look like golden geese. Pay attention to new partnerships and collaborations too. We might see some unexpected bedfellows as companies scramble to fill the gaps left by severed Chinese ties. It's like a giant game of biotech musical chairs. When the music stops, you don't want to be the one left standing. Lastly, keep an eye on technological innovations. Necessity is the mother of invention, after all. We might see a boom in new manufacturing technologies, secure data sharing platforms, or even entirely new approaches to drug discovery. It's like watching evolution and fast forward, adapt, or become extinct. So there you have it. The BIOSECURE Act isn't just a policy change, it's a seismic shift in the landscape of global pharma and biotech manufacturing and supply chains. It's going to separate the adaptable from the dinosaurs, the innovative from the stagnant. For pharma companies, it's time to channel your inner Boy Scout and be prepared. Diversify those supply chains, beef up your data security, and maybe start learning some new languages. You never know where your next manufacturing plant might end up. For investors, keep your wits about you and your eyes peeled. The biotech world is about to become as unpredictable as a game of three-card Monte on a windy day. But remember, with great change comes great opportunity. And for the rest of us, we're in for a heck of a show. The BIOSECURE Act is like the opening act of a grand geopolitical rock concert, and we've got front row seats. So sit back, grab your popcorn, or maybe your overpriced medications, and watch as the world of pharma is reshaped right before our very eyes. Will it lead to a new era of secure, innovative drug development, or will it throw a wrench into the gears of global scientific progress? Only time will tell. So hang on to your lab coats. The future of pharma is here, and it's going to be anything but boring. In an industry where precision and compliance are paramount, Apprentice's Tempo platform offers a cutting-edge manufacturing execution system solution. It's cloud-based, mobile-first, operator-centric, with the most intuitive UI in the industry, making it perfect for today's dynamic pharmaceutical manufacturing environments and for the production of the world's most complex drug products. Whether you're working on groundbreaking cell and gene therapies, biologics, or small molecules, Tempo provides a fully validated MES system that's both powerful and easy to use. It streamlines your processes, ensures compliance, and adapts to your specific manufacturing needs. So get off of paper batch records and discover how Apprentice's Tempo Manufacturing Cloud can transform your operations by visiting us at apprentice.io. Attention industry professionals, revolutionize your manufacturing process with the Apprentice Tempo Manufacturing Cloud, a manufacturing execution system built to streamline your operations, boost efficiency, and ensure compliance all in one powerful platform. Experience the future of manufacturing with our free 30-day trial. Scan the QR code on your screen now to unlock a world of innovation. Don't just keep pace, set the tempo as an industry leader with Apprentice. That's all for Apprentice.io's Industry Insights. I'm Frank Maggiore. Thanks for listening. Be sure to like and subscribe. Hit the bell icon for notifications when new episodes drop. Please comment on if you have any additional topics you would like for me to cover in this space, and we'll see you next week for more Industry Insights.